Hey there, it's Silver. This is Ship Graveyard Simulator 2. So this is actually a pretty simple concept. You are a shipbreaker, and it's your job to purchase vessels and parts of ships and things, and salvage them, scrap them for parts, and complete various contracts and things to make some money and keep your business afloat, all while upgrading your gear and getting into larger and larger vessels and learning how to take them all to pieces efficiently. So as with a lot of these hyper-specific simulators, the main gameplay loop is actually a relatively simple one, and the complexity comes into the various different ships and things that you actually have to take apart. What you're going to be doing each time is actually a pretty simple loop. So you have a truck, and this truck is very important because you need to put all of the crap that you're salvaging into the truck to actually make use of it. So you're going to get on your laptop, hop on, and look at the list of different ships that are currently available for salvaging, and you're going to buy one. It takes a little bit of money, usually not too much, especially compared to what you can actually make from properly salvaging it, but you do have to pay some up front to actually get the vessel or piece of ship or whatever it is to your scrapyard. And once you pay, you just drive your truck over there and park it in a convenient place, and away you go. It is entirely up to you how you actually start to take this thing apart, and each of them, they get pretty large. Of course, it'll start you off relatively small with small chunks of larger vessels, but as you go through the game, you get more complex situations, so you're obviously going to be getting much larger ships and stuff, entire ships, in fact, to actually take apart. And you'll have to start breaking it all up and grabbing all the garbage and everything off of it, and you decide how you want to take down the walls and in what order you want to take down the floors and all that good stuff, and start taking it to pieces and boxing up all of the materials and throwing them in the back of your truck. And at any interval you want, there's no required time to do it. It's just something that you can do whenever you feel like it. You can drive your truck over into the recycling center, which will allow you to play a little mini game where you have to guide the right colored bins of materials into the right colored big containers to actually sort them all out. And if you miss-sort some of them, then you'll lose some of those materials. So you want to sort them as accurately as possible so that you get the full amount of salvage, and also you get a bit of a monetary bonus when you do well, when you have a high combo for sorting things correctly. And once you sort them, they are in the top left of the screen there. You'll see your totals of each of the different kinds of materials, from metals, non-metals, equipment, which is worth the most, and liquids, usually stuff like kerosene and oil. And you can do a couple of different things with these materials once they're sorted. You can sell them, and each one sells for a different amount depending on which it is. So metals go for the least, and all the way up to equipment, which goes for the most. And you can sell large amounts of it at once if you wish, which is how you get most of your large sums of money at once. And you can also save up some of this stuff, which is highly recommended, in order to use it to upgrade your equipment, because you have quite a few different tools that you're going to be using to actually take these vessels apart, and they all have various different levels of upgrades, each one costing more and more of different materials to actually obtain. But even though it is a very sandboxy experience as to how you choose to take apart each objective, there is some guidance to be had, because every vessel has 3 different contracts that you have to complete in order to sort of be fully done with that vessel, if that makes sense. And each of these 3 contracts will require all sorts of different materials and specific items from the vessel that you're actually working on, and some of these are pretty easy to obtain. You may need 200 kilograms of low-carbon steel, which just means you can take apart a lot of the structure and get that pretty quickly, or you might need 500 kilograms of wood, so you got to go up to the upper decks and start taking apart the rooms that are made of wood. But sometimes you'll start running into some of the more expensive contracts, the one that rewards you with more money. They will require some of the rarer materials that are harder to find, stuff like aluminum, for instance. And of course, you can also start needing specific items rather than just raw materials, like 4 dartboards and 3 washing machines and stuff like that. They get really specific sometimes. So you have to start exploring around the ship and actually looking for all the various objectives that you can find in order to complete these contracts, because each time you complete one, you can return to the computer that you use to buy ships and just turn in the contracts there and get one large lump of money. And if you complete all 3 contracts for each vessel, you'll make many, many times what that vessel actually cost to get to your yard in the first place. And you're kind of done with a vessel whenever you feel that you're done, if that makes sense. Once you've completed all 3 of the objectives, all 3 of the contracts, you can kind of just get whatever else you feel you might need at the moment, or whatever looks particularly valuable, and then you sell the rest of what's left, the sort of shell of everything that you haven't processed if you didn't get necessarily every single bit of it, and then you have the room to buy another one and start the process again on a bigger vessel. As for how everything actually comes apart, the game uses a pretty satisfyingly detailed system for how all this works. So you're going to be seeing all these various glowing bits that glow in various colors, and those tell you what tools to use. So the blue circular bits are basically bolts that are holding things like walls together, and you've got to use your hammer to break those apart. You'll see yellow glowing bits like connectors and metal supports and braces and things, and these need a grinder. You got a big grinder with a nice indestructible grinding wheel in it, and you got to grind all of these apart in order to free whatever it is that they're supporting. And then you'll also sometimes come across these big beams and things with a red glow to them, and these have to be torched apart. You've got a torch that you can use to actually melt these, and these are generally things that are attaching really big, important structural segments of the ships together. So these are the things that you're going to need to take apart in order to free a lot of the really huge chunks of it. But you also have a couple of other tools. For one, you've got explosives, and explosives are not really useful for just salvaging a large section at once. That's not what they're for, because they cost 15 bucks each, which is pretty expensive, and that means it's not a cost-effective way to just take down your average wall, which you want to be doing by hand with, your hammer and your grinder and stuff. But you will come across sometimes large bulkhead doors and things that can't be disabled any other way, and this is where the explosives come in. The explosives allow you to actually blow these things open and get access to those rooms directly in a way that you couldn't otherwise do, and also to salvage the doors and things themselves, which often have a lot of valuable heavy materials in them. And you've also got a walkie-talkie, and this is interesting because you can actually call a crane to help you out, which is a pretty cool feature. I'm just sort of a fan of cranes in general. I think they're really neat, especially these huge dockyard cranes that are absolutely massive. And yeah, there are sections of the ship that you can't salvage because you can't break them down to a small enough piece to where you can actually pick them up. So you've got to call a crane instead to lift them to a warehouse. And the raw materials will all be distributed into that warehouse, and they'll be sorted out when you go to the sorting section next time, along with whatever's in your truck. And these segments can be pretty important because a lot of the more valuable contracts are going to involve some materials that you can only find on craneable parts. You could strip the entire ship down and not find any aluminum at all, but you might find in one room on the upper deck there's a pallet of materials, and if you're able to free that pallet, it's got exactly the right amount of aluminum that you need to complete the contract. That happens a lot. A lot of the more rare materials and things are going to be found on these. So it becomes sort of a puzzle to locate these various craneable materials, and then of course you gotta free them. You gotta make sure the crane can access them, so you've got to completely take apart everything above them so that the crane can lower down and get access to them, but you've also got to make sure they're not attached to the floor in any way, or that the walls aren't too close so they might block the crane. You've got to really work at salvaging the entire area around these craneable bits and making sure they're completely freed so the crane can both access them and lift them up. I really like the addition of the craneable items because it adds a bit of a puzzle element to salvaging the ship. There is already a little bit of a puzzle element because you're trying to salvage things in a way that makes it as convenient for you as possible, because if you have a lot of stuff on the upper decks but you salvage the ceiling a whole bunch to where you can't even walk to the upper decks very effectively, then you're going to make it a lot harder for yourself to get some of that stuff up there. So you tend to want to go from the top down in a lot of ships because that gives you the highest probability of not screwing yourself over and making it very difficult for yourself to navigate the ship. You do have a rope that is a little bit finicky. I think they need to rethink the controls on this a little bit, but it's sort of like a grappling hook. You can use it to traverse more vertical areas that you otherwise can't get to. So it is hard to completely destroy your ability to get up there at all, because you do have this rope that allows you to do it somewhat effectively, but really you want to keep the ship as intact as possible for as long as possible so that you can traverse all of the important areas as easily as you can, since you're going to be doing a lot of back and forth, because you can only hold a certain amount of stuff in your arms. You have a box that you put all your various salvaged bits in, and then you throw this box into the back of your truck. And your character is some sort of superhuman entity that can throw 100 kilograms of steel just yeeted across half a mile of distance all the way to the back of your truck. It's pretty amazing. It's very useful that you can do that, but that doesn't mean you've got to have a clear view of your truck in order to put it in there. So sometimes you may just be throwing stuff over the side of the ship for a while. That way you don't have to make a whole bunch of repeated trips back and forth to the truck in order to actually, salvage efficiently. And then once you're done, you hop down and start carrying all those boxes where they should go and stuff like that. It's very much up to you how you actually want to do your salvaging operation and what is the most convenient way for you to do it. But that's kind of the cool aspect of the game, is it's very much up to you. You can go through the ship and just pick up all of the loose stuff first if you want to, all the desks and plastics laying on the ground and tarps and unsupported stuff that you can just walk through and pick up without using any tools. Or you can just start working on the floors and ceilings and walls immediately if you want to, or start freeing some of the biggest sections for the crane as your first goal, or however you want to do it. The game is very open to allowing you to sort of just use the tools however you wish to salvage the ship in whatever order you want. Just a pretty neat concept concept, because it is a very, it turns it into a very sandboxy experience. You know, you're given basically like a big metal playground full of tetanus, and it's your job to just sort of take it to pieces however you want. Now, one of the things you'll be doing with all the money that you're getting from this is, of course, buying new blueprints for upgraded tools. And every tool, well, most every tool, except for the walkie-talkie and the explosives, can be upgraded through like 10 different levels of upgrades. And this is where all those other raw materials that you're gathering come in, and of course they cost a lot of money as you go on. They start to double in price each time, so you do need quite a bit of money to get better tools, but it is worth it because higher level tools perform whatever their job is much faster. So a higher level hammer will take fewer blows to take down various bolts and things. A higher level crate can hold more salvage so that you don't have to return to your truck as often because you can have a heavier and heavier crate of stuff. And something like your rope can also be upgraded, and it allows it to reach farther so that you can actually get to more vertical areas on taller, larger ships later on and stuff. One little detail that I particularly like is that all the stuff that you can upgrade changes in appearance as you upgrade it, which is nice. All of your tools are replaced with better looking variants that are newer and shinier and actually look like they might be effective instead of the stuff you start with, which is in a pretty sad state. You can even upgrade your hands, which will cause you to wrap them and put them in gloves and stuff, and upgraded hands allow you to grab more than one piece of salvage at a time, so every time you click to grab something, you're actually grabbing it in a larger area of stuff instead, so you're more efficient that way. So I really like the fact that all of your tools actually change in appearance every time you upgrade them. It really gives you a good sense of progression, like you're actually, you know, steering your company into the future and getting better gear instead of just using whatever you found buried in the ground that's like 500 years old. So overall, I think it's a really solid experience for what it is. I know, for some people, they're going to see gameplay like this and think that it looks quite boring, because that's just the nature of simulators in general. Some people find them very tedious, but one thing you got to remember is one person's tedious is another person's zen. And for stuff like Euro Truck Simulator, for instance, the idea of just driving along a road, for some people is like terminally boring, but for others is just really satisfying zen gameplay. And this is definitely one of those. It's something that is quite satisfying to set up, because just setting up a large section of the ship by, freeing everything and loosening everything and then just clicking once and watching the whole thing cascade down in a big pile of scrap is a really satisfying feeling, and it does pull off the whole you're salvaging these big, dangerous industrial things vibe really well. But what about the early access? What about some stuff that might need fixing or some stuff that I would like to see change? Well, one, the pacing of the tool upgrades is a little bit weird. There are several tools where you feel every upgrade is an enormous difference, and then there are others that you have to upgrade many times before you really feel much of a difference at all. Like, upgrading the hammer just once or twice can halve the time it takes to take down walls, which is an immediately noticeable difference, but you gotta upgrade the saw like 4 or 5 times before it really feels like it's sawing through things any faster. So I think maybe unifying the pace at which the upgrades change the effectiveness of the tool might be useful, because right now they feel like they're not quite balanced the same as each other. Another thing that I would like to see changed is the flashlight, oddly enough. Normally that's not the kind of thing I would mention, but in this case you have to use your flashlight pretty often because the game does have a day-night cycle, night does fall, and you're in these big unpowered ships, which means it gets quite dark inside. But the way the flashlight currently works is it's way too harsh. Like, it's a very bright, cold white flashlight that blinds you, and it actually removes detail from whatever you're looking at because it's so bright, and it becomes very difficult to make out what you're looking at sometimes, especially in areas of the ship with white or gray walls. The flashlight just takes away all detail for whatever is in your field of view because it's so harshly bright. I think it needs to be toned down a little bit to be more useful. Because of the amount that you're encouraged to use it, it would be nice if it were more of like a warm white orangey glow that didn't quite bleach out everything you were looking at when you used it. As far as other stuff, the game is a little bit buggy here and there. It does need some bug fixes. I've noticed a lot of bugs with the sorting minigame. Sometimes it triggers twice and causes the camera to not zoom to where it's supposed to be, so you actually end up doing the entire sorting minigame zoomed out of the yard in a place the camera's not supposed to stay there, but it does sometimes. And I've also had it once make a just absolutely deafening, thunderous noise when I tried to open the door to the sorting area, and it refused to open. It sort of glitched itself out, and I had to restart the game in order to get it to open again. So there's definitely some bugginess here and there. I haven't noticed any instability, I haven't had any crashes. Recording software is one of those things that is really good at teasing out crashes if a game has instability, because some games just really hate to be recorded, but I found that this game doesn't seem to be unstable at all. And honestly, the only other thing I would suggest that they add is simply more gameplay variety. They've done a really good thing by using those craneable elements to introduce a sort of puzzle aspect to the salvaging to make you want to salvage in specific orders and specific rooms and things to free these objects for the crane first before you do other stuff. And I think they could flesh that out a little bit more and do more with that by giving you more of these unique challenges for each of the ships, making each ship a little bit more unique by having sort of a specific thing that you need to do that adds a little bit more of a puzzle element to it. They've already got the groundwork for this because you will see some more puzzly bits here and there, like some ships will have an active electrical box that will electrify all the bolts and walls around them, and you can't take them down because it'll shock you until you find and disable the box first, and then you can take apart all the wiring and stuff. And there will also sometimes be some gas lines that will explode if you grind into them and severely damage that part of the ship and take away some of your salvage potential and stuff. So you've got to actually trace the gas lines through and find a junction and actually shut down the gas valves and things to make it safe before you can start to take it apart. So they've already got some good ideas when it comes to adding in some more detail to the kinds of ways that you're going to have to take these ships apart, and I would like to see them flesh those ideas out more into, more gameplay variety, give you more challenges to overcome for each one. So that's my current look at Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 as it currently stands, a pretty solid Zen simulator for people that like deconstructing things. I will put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page so that you can go and check the game out yourself. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.